Okay, Runnersluck. I've got an argument against your statements. I'm going to try and be as I'm going to try to stick with some kind of continuity towards your statements. So, your first statement was that evolution, comparing human evolution to an iPod being found. Comparing Richard Dawkins' statement to saying that you find an iPod and it just it's 1,000 years old and happens to work. It's fully functional. It's a bit wrong really, because what you're really doing is ignoring all the studies behind evolution. You're ignoring the evidence completely. You're basically stating that man appeared out of absolutely nowhere, and there's no science behind it. And what you're actually doing is you're not really talking about evolution here. You're actually talking about how creationism would have it, how creationism would explain things. So you're really not even getting outside of your own box. You're not even approaching it. You're not even looking at the evidence. You're looking at none of it. You're not even looking outside your own little tiny box. It shows you basically have no interest in trying to find out the facts, really. Because if you did, you wouldn't be making stupid creationist videos on YouTube, but never mind. Your second point is that you moved on to talk about human beings and their complexity. What I find really interesting about that is that there are plenty of other complex organisms on the planet to use in your argument. However, you stick with humans, which is quite funny actually. It's a bit egotistical really to say that human beings are so complex, and realistically speaking, in comparison to a lot of other creatures, they're not. They're quite basic actually when it comes to actual specialization in a particular area of predation or in a particular area of even being a prey animal. They're not particularly fantastic. I mean, we don't really have any special sets of skills apart from thinking and being able to use our hands pretty well. I mean, other than that, we don't really have, we don't have the same specializations as, for instance, a lion does with its power and its bite strength, its large teeth, and its ability to run at 40 kilometers an hour, or a shark, a great white, for instance, an animal which can roll its eyes back into its head a moment before it strikes, an animal which can strike at speeds of around 50 miles an hour. It's a 2-ton shark that can strike you at 50 miles an hour. It's like being hit by a fucking car. These organisms are really complex, far more complex. Their sensory organs are way more acute than ours are, and their ability to sense prey without really having to think very much about it, it's astonishing. Also, flies, their eyes are a hell of a lot more complicated than ours are. They don't see a complex picture, but they have an ability to react to information that's coming in much quicker, because they can see things at the speed at which it's actually happening, whereas we see our interpretation of it, which is not perfect. Our eyes actually get confused. If you watch Richard Hammond's Invisible Worlds, that's probably available on YouTube, you'll see that. We're really not as sophisticated as we like to think that we are. Our brains are quite sophisticated, but then, there are thinking traps, simple ones, which the brain can get bogged down in, which I think is quite funny. And you talk of the organs, each one having an individual function. Well, again, as I say, there are plenty of animals out there that you could have picked, each of whose organs have their own separate function, which operate in what appears to be harmony. However, this is your third statement, I just want to make a point about that. There isn't really any harmony in the human body. The kidneys, for instance, control of their permeability is under control by a system called negative feedback control, whereby various sense organs in the body pick up the water level in the bloodstream, and they send this information back to the brain, and a hormone known as antidiuretic hormone is released from the brain if you're low on fluid, and this stops your body from getting rid of so much water as it normally would do. So it reduces the permeability of the kidneys, and when the water level is too high, the level of ADH is dropped, the body stops producing it, and this brings the level of kidney permeability up, which allows the body to get rid of the excess water quicker. So your body really does live in extremes most of the time. You either have too much water or too little. You're either going to the toilet too much, or you need a drink. You're never in a state where you just don't need it, um, unless maybe you've just done the toilet and your body's adjusted you to that level where your where your water levels are perfect. But then within about 10 minutes it's going to be off again. You're going to need a drink or you're going to need to go to the toilet. Um, you know, and also there's various different other examples of negative feedback, but there's no real harm in it. So I think that's really interesting that you made that point. And then you make the point regarding your comparison of human evolution being like finding an iPod that's 1,000 years old and not being able to explain it. What's really funny about that is that there's a mountain of evidence to explain evolution, and not just the evolution of human beings, but the evolution of all species, DNA mapping, biotechnology, selective breeding, um, the fossil record. All of these are evidence of evolution, overwhelming amounts of it as well. There's an awful lot of evidence for evolution. Well, I'd really like to ask you actually, since you're telling me that it's very unscientific for someone to state that evolution is a fact, I think it's very unscientific of you to state that creationism must be a fact and that evolution is not a fact. There's not really any science behind it. I would like you to go out, write your thesis if you think yourself a budding scientist or even a budding sort of free thinker, someone who would want to prove things, someone who would want to try to disprove evolution. Please write a paper on it, do your research, do some experiments. I'd love to hear back from you, because if it really is that simple, then you should find it pretty easy. Because obviously you seem to think that you're pretty qualified. You should find it pretty easy to disprove it. So I invite you, please go out, do your own testing, your own investigations, and get back to us. Write a paper on it, put that out for peer review, see what everybody else thinks of it. There's not really going to be a bias. I mean, if your studies prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that evolution is wrong and that all us atheists are going to burn in hell, you know, people want to see that. People want to see the proof, especially your religious people. You haven't really proven anything yet. You've not done any research. You haven't produced any evidence. What I think is really interesting is that you try to put the onus on science to produce the evidence, but we already have, and there's fucking loads of it. You yourself haven't actually produced any evidence for your case. Um, so I'd like to see that, please. Please show me the evidence. Um, show me the evidence of your particular findings, because I've already seen the evidence of science's findings. It's all over the world. It's in lots of museums. It's everywhere. It's out there. Loads of it. And you can look at it yourself. That's the great thing about it. You're free to go to a museum and check that evidence out with your own eyes, to check if it is real or not. But yeah, I would advise you, do some digging, do some research, do some experiments, see what you come up with. Okay, thanks for that.